Megan, we talked about the Netflix strength within content. It's arguably the king of content. We know its popularity. We know it's winning streaming. I want to focus in on this recent price hike. As Kevin pointed out, new content has been limited as of late. It hasn't been necessarily a strong suit for Netflix, yet they're still raising prices. But if they're still the best and they raise the prices at maybe their least offensive time, that might even be saying more about how they feel about their strength than anything. Was there a buzz around this, or was it mostly unnoticed?
I was really excited to come on and talk to you guys today because you asked a really targeted question. You're like, what is the consumer response to this price increase? And this is where we feel like our data really shines. And we're listening for consumers who are talking about, this price increase and what they're saying. And what we saw in general, the buzz comparatively to the last time that Netflix raised prices is much more muted. Whenever you look at a chart of these mentions, you can see a huge spike in 2019 whenever they increased prices, I think by $2 on the standard plan. And then on this last price increase at the end of October, that was only $1. We did not see as severe a response. And you can see that there on the far right of the chart. That other significant spike that you see it's not annotated, but it's in November of 2019 was when Disney Plus launched. And so people were comparing the pricing of both platforms. And so this makes sense. But if I'm Netflix, this is really good for me. If I'm Netflix and I'm looking at how consumers responding, I'm very pleased because ultimately it looks like consumers are kind of giving Netflix a pass. It's not causing a huge stir. And so I think that this is really promising whenever you look at Netflix moving forward, because I think they have 195 million users. So this applied across that expansive of a network can really, I think, move the needle for them.
Yeah, Megan, I think this content is key because you see the fact that your data tells us that Netflix is now in the marrow of the U.S. consumer, right? And it's not going anywhere. There'll always be someone leaving and coming, right? We know that we're mature adults. We understand that big business like this, there'll always be a little bit of positive and negative turnover. But that lack of a reaction to a price hike tells me that they are now embedded in the U.S. household, and they are now, human actions. U.S. consumer activity has switched to Netflix, and they're not switching back. Right. So you're right. This is the best possible. No real shocking movement is the best possible news for a company like Netflix. But I just want to know this. I'm going to take you into the future a little more, Megan, and I apologize for this because I think this is the next thing for Netflix. Have you guys heard, has LikeFolio heard your monitoring of social data? Has anyone talked about the significance of sports and Netflix and streamers and sports? Because if you don't realize, a lot of these contracts with these networks are coming up for renew. And sports is the differentiator between your regular TV and streamers. Is there any mention of things like that? Because I'm old enough to remember when Fox outbid for the NFL. And everyone's like, oh, how dare they do that? They paid too much money. Yeah, did they? No, they didn't, looking back. So I want to know if you guys have seen anything on the horizon. Doesn't have to be sports. Anything on the horizon for Netflix that may be a game changer.
I think that from a sports perspective, obviously live sports is a big driver for people who are signing on to subscriptions. We see live sports subscriptions driving subscriptions inside of Hulu because they provide live TV and they provide some type of a live sports option. The same with YouTube TV, the same with ESPN Plus. So I think that, that is significant. However, live TV hasn't really been Netflix's niche, right? They just worked on creating this huge content library. And so I think it's promising that looking ahead, I think they announced they're releasing 50 new original series or movies in the month of November. So I think that they're starting to get that content churn out. What you're looking at right here, this is happiness mentions. And what we really wanted to show here is when we originally were trying to understand how consumers were reacting to this price increase, the first place we looked was sentiment, because you would expect as prices raise for sentiment to drop. And what you can see in that September and October, there was a drop around the cutie scandal. I'm sure you guys remember that. But into the end of October and November, the needle didn't move at all. We had to go in and look and say, okay, maybe let's only pull negative sentiment. And there really wasn't a consumer reaction, and not in a negative way. So this is just one of those things that I think, as you mentioned, Netflix is in the marrow of consumers, that, this is somewhat expected, perhaps. This is something that we'll continue to monitor as this starts to hit billing cycles. Maybe people don't realize it yet. Who knows if a dollar is really going to move the needle? So looking ahead, we're really going to watch those cancellation mentions, and we're really going to watch this response to this original content that they're starting to roll out again. Now, as you mentioned, that the studios are opened and they're able to start pumping that out.
Megan, super quick here because we got to run. Yeah. Was this able to go unnoticed because of all the other things going on and the fact that it was just the $1? Is this just more about maybe their market research saying, hey, a $1 increase isn't enough to scare off consumers?
Yeah, I think that their timing was impeccable. They launched this and then they teased all of this new content that's supposed to come out through the end of the year. So I think that if that new content cycle can retain, especially through the new year, that's a critical threshold when a lot of people go through and they purge subscriptions if they're going to. But I think it's smart of Netflix to go ahead and sneak that in before versus after, because then consumers are more likely to stick around, watch that content, and then you're already used to it. But we'll have to see. We'll see what response looks like. But so far, from a consumer perspective, there doesn't seem to be a ton of buzz or a ton of backlash to that price increase.